Welcome to Notepad. I'm your host Ibrahim. Sani. We continue our sectorial outlook for this interview, as this interview is brought to you by Bursa Malaysia. And of course, this evening we shall be discussing the oil and gas industry, because the oil and gas industry has indeed grown accustomed to experiencing shocks throughout the decades. Yet the demand contraction of more than 10 million barrels a day in the first half of 2020 during the peak of lockdown provided a glimpse of what a new baseline could look like. Reports show that the industry has cut more than $150 billion of capital expenditure, while pressure from investors to improve returns and environmental and social and governance or ESG performance has increased. This has demonstrated why the industry must focus not only on improving its business resilience, but also on responding to stakeholders' demands to build back better. Drawing on our conversation to Malaysia, how will oil and gas counters perform in the near term, and how will you as an investor approach this sector? Here to discuss this and more is TJ Liao, the Regional Co-Head Oil and Gas of Maybank Kim Eng. TJ, thanks again for taking the time to speak with us. Let's do a quick roundup first on the sector. How do you view the oil and gas?
I think for the oil and gas sector now, we are on a cyclical phase. I think since the 21st century, we have gone through 3 phases, 6 years every time. So since 2000, this would be the third phase. So in the third phase now, we are facing 2 sort of setbacks, supply as well as demand shock. And the fact of the matter is that with this COVID-19 pandemic, I think it puts a further strain to the oil and gas sector. This cycle seems much early this year.
All right, let's pull up that particular graphic that shows the oil price. This particular graph is very much familiar to you. It shows that there's a huge dip right at the earlier part of this year because of the demand that has been seen to be dropping off following the quarantine, not just in Malaysia but around the world. But since then, it has leveled off to about $40 a barrel. But the collapse in oil prices to about $40 a barrel this year has prompted companies like Petronas to consider exiting the Gharaf oil field in southern Iraq, for instance, and this has been reported by the media very recently. As quoting the group president and CEO, Tengku Aziz, and this is because the conversation is always on Petronas, even though it's not listed. People still benchmark the performance of oil and gas with that of Petronas. How do you think Petronas would be closely observed now, particularly even more so because the budget season is very near us right now?
Okay, for Petronas, I think we are seeing a similar trend across the globe. As an oil major, I think they have responded aggressively and swiftly to the oil price shock very much. If you were to see their strategy, it's very similar to the rest. They have cut CAPEX, they have cut OPEC, they have curbed spending. They are trying to basically preserve cash flow in this sort of uncertain and volatile market. So I think this would be a good move in a way that at $40, I think there is a need to reset the cost base for oil companies. And at this price as well, they are also looking at divestment of assets, impairment of assets, anyway to basically recapitalize the balance sheet and to emerge stronger at a later time. So they are looking at a lot of various options to basically preserve cash and to improve cash flow. And their plans in Gharaf is one of the strategies that a lot of oil companies are adopting. But having said that, I think in this sort of cycles, when there's a down cycle, there is also an opportunity. We have seen several companies have also begun to look for opportunistic investments, whereby prices like that, you don't get that during the good time. So companies that have longer-term views, strong balance sheets, will be able to capitalize on these such opportunities.
Yeah, one thing interesting, TJ, is that in that interview that Tengku Taufik did with The Edge very recently, is that Taufik mentioned that the company, as in Petronas, would be remiss if they didn't look at oil and gas related acquisition. I think largely because of the situation right now is very tumultuous. Pricing could be quite interesting to look at. Valuation could be interesting to look at. How serious do you think Petronas is going to pursue the acquisition of oil and gas, as alluded by Tengku Taufik yesterday?
I think every deal would have to match their return. I think that would be the single parameters that all companies would look at, and whether what is their long-term strategy going forward. If you were to look at the recent trends, most of the big companies are aiming to transition to green energy, whereby they are looking at trying to reduce emissions as much as possible, the price of reduce and the rest. So the way things go, that is how they are trying to balance fossil as well as green energy going forward. Acquisitions could be on fossil-related deals, or it could be for that venturing into new energy, for example.
TJ, how do you think Petronas-related counters will move in the near term? Perhaps some guidance or outlook into the Petronas-related counters for the investors to understand a little bit more of.
Okay, I think if you were to look at the Petronas-related counters, you would see that the approach they take would be, I would say, cautious. They will be looking at cutting down as much capex spending. In a way, because of that, there could be a limitation in terms of dividend payment that could potentially be curtailed during this cycle. But having said that, I think having a good management team running a good company, I think companies with strong balance sheet resilience will tend to thrive in any down cycle.
Right. TJ, we'll take a short break before we continue our conversation. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying on with us. We continue our conversation on the sectorial outlook of oil and gas. One such company, of course, is Sapura. And while Tan Sri Syahril Shamsuddin's planned retirement in March 2021 has been announced, he will be succeeded by Datuk Muhammad Anwar Taib, who takes the market, according to Maybank, by surprise, at least by timing-wise. Maybank is, of course, looking at the cost reduction and debt restructuring exercises that will take precedence over the leadership role over there. But we have here TJ Liao, Regional Co-Head Oil and Gas, Maybank Kim Ng, joining us. Perhaps TJ, let's talk a little bit more about the succession plan of Sapura per se before we jump into the business of Sapura outright. What do you think is happening right now, at least from the leadership of Sapura currently?
I think the leadership transition, I think, took the market by surprise, timing-wise. We all know that Sri Syahril has been the face of Sapura all this time. So the timing of his plan, I think, took the market by surprise. We were also equally surprised by that. But having said that, I think business will go on as usual. I think there is a need for Sapura as a whole to recapitalize their balance sheet. I think this is very important for them to basically be relevant in the longer term. So I think they have put in a plan, so we shall see how it goes about.
Yeah, that plan, of course, that they have put in has raised a lot of skepticism amongst analysts like yourself, and the consensus is that they might not be doing too good in the near term. Do you believe that something might change in the near term that would result in a change of direction for Sapura?
Okay, for Sapura, I mean, from our perspective, from an outsider looking in, there is a need for them to restructure and refinance their debt. I think in terms of net debt to EBITDA, Currently, they are slightly above the market. So there is a need to refinance or restructure the debt so that that could potentially ease their cash flow issues in immediate and midterm. And once that happens, coupled with the cost down exercise in the group, so there could be some savings as and when the market turns more positive for their whole business cycle, as in their engineering, construction, energy business, and drilling operations.
TJ, another company that has been exciting the market is of course Serba Dynamic, and while they are pushing for more deals, the pipeline for that company is strong. Will Serba Dynamic continue to be a Malaysian success story?
I think Malaysia, I think we are fortunate to have a few success stories, like you mentioned earlier on. Serba Dynamic is one of the success stories. But if you were to look at the global oil and gas per se, we have several names in the market. In the FPSO space, we have 3 companies that are already in the top 10 global FPSO operators in the world. So we are world-class at the likes of Vincent, the likes of Bumi Armada, as well as MIT. And earlier on, we mentioned about Sapura. Sapura has become a global player globally, whereby they have their operations worldwide. So in terms of Malaysian success stories, we could be equally proud to have those companies that have basically carved their niche and also built their global footprint out of Malaysia.
Yeah, and that global footprint out of Malaysia is actually quite important because diversifying the business, at least in this sector, is actually quite critical, which I believe, at least, both Yinsen and Bumi Armada and many others are actually doing that. But Serba Dynamics still steals the thunder, in my opinion. And Serba Dynamic Holdings, of course, has been named in a peer group of the top 50 Asian high-yield corporate issuers by Fitch Ratings. And Fitch Ratings says that this reflects its strong market position in Malaysia, where it was the 4th largest oil and gas service and equipment company by revenue back in 2017. Do you think that this kind of position is sustainable moving forward?
I think sustainability depends on the growth of the company, what strategies it plans to put forward to. But having said that, if you were to look back into their track record, their capabilities, I think Serba Dynamic has done very well since the IPO. They have managed to grow so much bigger from their IPO days. So I would say that Serba would be one of the companies to watch out for in terms of oil and gas companies in Malaysia that could potentially show bigger potential in the near future.
I know, we were just talking about the transition of leadership at Sapura and how Tan Sri Syaril has been the enigmatic personality there. The same can be said about Serba Dynamic, where Datuk Karim is actually the persona there and is pushing forward the company using his own brand individually. Does the issue of succession planning come about in your analysis of Serba Dynamic moving forward for the company, i.e. with Serba Dynamic?
I think for Serba Dynamic and also other companies that there will always be succession for that plan. So I wouldn't rule out having professionals to run it. I think I would to put it into perspective. Serba Dynamic is well run. I believe that they would have put in a structure as and when whatever transitions in terms of leadership in the near future. So I would say that Serba Dynamic is in good hands for now.
All right. We'll take one more break before continuing conversation with TJ. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for staying on with us. I have on Skype right now TJ Liao, the Regional Co-Head Oil and Gas of Maybank Kim Eng. TJ, let's draw this conversation to a conclusion. We want to have some, overall or overarching idea of the oil and gas sector? Because oil and gas used to be the talking point for the country. Is this still going to be the case going on for at least towards the fourth quarter of this year and next year?
I think for the oil and gas company per se, I think it's very cyclical. But having said that, I would say that the worst is over for this year. I think we have seen the worst in Q2. Things have picked up in Q3 as well as Q4. But more importantly, oil price has stabilized to a $40 average level dated Brent. So that is a positive. But on the longer term, there will be talks of energy transitions on the longer term. But in the current juncture now, I will say oil and gas will probably play a more prominent role going forward over the next 20 to 30 years. The fact that it's practically clean in terms of energy. But having said that, there will be opportunities. Companies that have rebased their costs would benefit. And also, I think oil will basically still remain relevant for the next 10 to 20 years. So all in all, in the oil and gas perspective, it's cyclical, yes, per se, but we think that there could potentially be another peak cycle probably in the next 5 to 8 years. So
okay.
that is our view on that.
All right. We saw how, you're mentioning that the prices, the oil price have stabilized to around $40 per barrel. But that dip that we saw when quarantine started to happen around the world early in the year, it went down all the way down to $20 per barrel or even lower than that. Do you think that as COVID is not solvable in the near term, as the race for vaccine is still taking place, that kind of dip will probably still happen in the near term, should there be a spike of cases around the world yet again?
Okay, assuming there would be subsequent phases or waves in terms of COVID, that would have an impact to the oil demand. Okay, but the situation now has improved so much versus March then, because OPEC Plus have come together to practically curtail supply. So when you have demand destruction from COVID, there is also supply curtailment from the OPEC on a collective basis. So it kind of balances off the demand and supply dynamics. But having said that, COVID, depending on how optimistic you are in terms of getting a vaccine, because getting a vaccine would be a major catalyst to the oil and gas sector in terms of demand. But assuming there is, we potentially will not find a vaccine probably for the next 6 months, then I think the market will potentially be aware that $40 level would be a reasonable level for oil and gas to operate in. And at $40 per barrel, we have seen that most of the oil majors globally have cut their capex by 1/3, and Shell in US is unlikely to make a comeback at such prices. So in a way, market is trying to rebalance itself. Longer term, we always take a view that once there's a development of a vaccine for COVID, the oil and gas sector will be one of the primary beneficiaries on that.
TJ, final aspect of this interview, we're looking at budget right before us, and the Finance Minister, Tengku Zafrul, is expected to table a very interesting budget, a budget that we probably have never seen before following this pandemic afflicting us. How much do you think is given thought in terms of the oil and gas sector into building the budget for next year?
I think in terms of budget, I think we would like to hear the government's thoughts on the Petronas dividend payment. I think that will be a very interesting topic that will probably follow intently. So with this sort of cycles, I think their initial expectation of paying a set amount of dividend commitments, I think that has to be revised, because what the market experienced back in March has totally put the dividend budget off tangent. So it would be good if the government were to agree to a reduction in terms of dividend payments from Petronas this year and next year, as a company as they recover from these setbacks in a way. Beyond all this while, we know that the dividend commitment by Petronas to the government has been pretty fixed 1 year or 2 years in advance. So if there's a flexibility in terms of that, whereby it's being measured via the free cash flows of the companies, I think that will be a more prudent and longer term way going forward.
All right.
So for both Petronas and government.
Okay. There's a lot of words in terms of cautious and wouldn't say pessimistic, but there's a lot of word of cautious here. Do you believe that this is going to hold in the next few months in terms of the outlook for this sector? Cautious is the name of the game.
I think cautious has been ongoing, but I think you could say that it's gradual optimism which is creeping up in the sector now, because everyone will be eyeing on when will vaccine be developed, because once that develops, it's instant, instant catalyst for the sector.
All right, fantastic. That was Liao Tong Jun, or TJ Liao, the regional co-head, oil and gas at Maybank Kim Eng. That was this interview of Notepad with him. And of course, if you've missed any part of this interview, just head on to Astro AWANI, look for Notepad over there, and you can find plenty of interviews like this. You can also find this interview on the Bursa Malaysia website. Just head on to Bursa Malaysia Research Centre, and you can find plenty of interviews like this as well that can be found there. If you're an investor, our suggestion has always been this: know what you're investing, try to learn as much as possible in investing in these kind of sectors, and remember to always use all the resources that you can get your hands on in order for you to make the best and most informed decision in order for you to invest. Until then, thanks very much for watching, and until next episode, goodbye.